Thank you so much, MD, for granting us this opportunity for this quick interview. In this briefing, we were basically giving an update on the grid statistics, specifically in terms of where we are as a country on generation. So we kept on hearing you referring to VREs in the much of your presentation. Maybe you can just define to us what is the full meaning of VRE and why do they matter in the energy mix?
VRE, Kenya is endowed with a lot of generation resources, and indeed clean or green, whichever one prefers. We have green energy coming from geothermal, which has the biggest quantum in the country and the biggest capacity, and we are really leaders in this particular area. We also have from hydro, which again, we have adequate capacity. But then we have these other renewable sources which are intermittent, that is they vary. If I was to use an illustration like solar or wind, and you had a bulb in your home, the way they behave to the grid and indeed their generation is such that at times your bulb is very dim, and then at times it gets very bright. So if you are living in a house which dims, goes bright, it keeps varying from being very dim to very bright. A number of times, if you stayed in that house for not for long, you may at times prefer that you turn it off, because it's better off remaining at a particular level. So the variable renewable energy resources like wind and solar have that kind of generation pattern. This is because, like for wind, the wind will keep varying. At times, even if you stand in a place, it gets stronger. That means it's getting brighter if it's connected to a bulb. At times, it starts reducing, at which point then it will be getting dim. And for wind, that is how that's what happens. For solar, it's also the same. When the cloud clears, then it is very bright. When a small cloud comes, it becomes slightly dimmer. When a big cloud comes, it becomes dim and it can go off completely. So that is the kind of generation you get from wind and solar. And on a larger scale, that is actually what it does to the grid. It keeps reducing it, going up, it keeps varying from up and down, which, while for a grid, if you maintain the quantum or the percentage to be slightly small, its impact may not be felt. But as you keep increasing its percentage, then you start noticing it. And the first ones which normally notice that fluctuation are industries which are very sensitive on certain parameters. And it can at times cause them to lose all that they were producing at a particular time. For a person just using the lights, it may not be so severe, but yes, that is exactly how it is. And it is the thing that we are saying, Immaculate, that it is solar and wind. We are really blessed as a country to have a lot of solar and wind. But in terms of how much you have in the grid, it should be tampered with the other base generation. It's almost at times like salt. Salt is excellent without it at times, but you cannot say exactly the same. But if you started increasing the quantum, then it becomes quite repulsive in terms of you can't even eat that food. So the issue is that if you increase these VREs, it reaches an extent when actually it becomes now disruptive to the entire grid. And that was really the conversation we have been having today. The regime we have had in the past is take or pay, or must dispatch. So if it increases, then you always are forced to reduce the others. And part of that reduction, which is really painful to us, even and indeed to the country, is you have to vent the geothermal. That is, you have to release some of the steam just to make room for them to be in the grid if the demand is such as to require that. Yeah, so that is really the challenge. So at times it can go as high as 34. And at the point when it's 34, then of course you are releasing a lot of steam into the air just to create room for them to be dispatched.
And what happens when it goes down? When the percentage of the VREs goes down?
Then of course the grid becomes more stable.
Okay.
But a number of times again, when you even look at their nature, solar by 5 p.m., it's gone. And when you look at when we really require power in Kenya, it's from around 7 going all the way to around 9 p.m. So by the time you really require a lot, it's not there. So that to the extent that when you look at the power requirement of Kenya during the day, we are totally adequate. We have adequate generation to meet our demands during the day. But where the biggest challenge comes in is at peak. And that peak time, they are not there. So again, that could be part of the reason where you really have to tamper the quantity. You don't want to occupy a lot of space, and it comes during a time you don't really need it, and to displace those very stable generations, which again is very damaging. The moment you vent steam, you are not only damaging the plant, but you're even losing a resource, because that steam that you've released into the air has actually gone to waste. So those are the challenges. But the whole issue, Immaculate, is the issue of balancing. I think the message to Kenyans is that we just need to strike a balance so that we don't increase too much of VRE when we don't have adequate baseload generation. And it was for that reason that we are really making a rally call for more investment to be done in the geothermal space, more investment to be done in hydro, and even the issue that the government has been pursuing. And we really welcome it, the issue of the floating batch. That one is really required. Then ultimately, of course, the LNG plant. By virtue of the fact that these VREs are increasing in quantum. And if you even look at the aspect that some Kenyans are already also installing rooftop solars, which are tied to the grid, it even now worsens the situation. So that then the urgency with which we require the LNG plant or the floating batch is even becoming more and more urgent as more Kenyans install some of this captive generation and tie to the grid, because it impacts in a similar way.
Okay, so when you talk about the LNG batch, what exactly is it coming to address in relation to the impact that we have currently of the VREs?
It is to address the variability, because you see, like, let me give you the illustration that if the VRE are contributing, say, 300 megawatts, and maybe it rains throughout the country, all of a sudden, and at times, you know, some of these rains can be very bright right now, and it starts falling in very large quantum. At that time, both wind and solar go out. When it's raining, you don't have solar, you don't have wind. So if they were, for example, generating 300 megawatts, and it starts raining, then you've dropped the entire 300. You need another plant to start from zero or wherever it was and fill that gap, so that you don't, of course, you continue serving the Kenyans. But again, the speed of ramping up is critical to rescuing the grid. If it does not come up very quickly, you can lose the entire grid. And that is why actually when you look at the gas turbines, they are very fast in ramping up. You know, they can start from a particular quantum and rise to maximum within a very short time. So it is those kind of plants really which can answer or which can mitigate against that impacts of variability.
Okay. You raised a very interesting point in terms of when the contribution of the VREs goes very high, sometimes during the day, we have to vent off geothermal. Does it follow that geothermal is a cheaper source than the VREs?
No, the issue is mass dispatch. The mass, if you look at the what is called the merit order, the mass dispatch plants means mass dispatch. So once you've dispatched them in a mast, then you must now look at what else can you reduce if there is no space. And of course, one of the candidates normally is, you know, because the margin for hydro is normally very small. So that your ability even to reduce, of course, you'll have reduced the hydro, but again, you care about the frequency of and the stability of the grid. So it lends itself as almost the first pot once all the other interventions have actually been done.
And what is the cost implication of venting the geothermal?
Of course, I think it is more to do with, you know, once you pay the capacity, you only pay for the units that is actually dispatched. So the only issue is that, of course, you've lost that opportunity to utilize what was actually vented.